I think we're probably about time, so we'll just get kicking off, get the afternoon going. Sorry we're getting started a little bit late. There's still people on their way, fighting trains and traffic and other things. But I just wanted to get started. We'll stick broadly to the schedule, I think. For anybody who was here for the workshops earlier, it was good to get questions in amongst everything that was going on. For the afternoon, a lot of our presentations are coming in remotely, so we'll probably just be best holding questions to the end of each of the segments on the schedule there. So we'll go through, yeah, as just there. Got little reminders between each one. And it is a hybrid setup today for the first time for this event. So maybe just bear with us if there's challenges juggling between in-person and remote, getting the microphones and the audio levels correct for each of the videos. And I think there's a Zoom call or two to have with people coming in remotely. So there we go. Thank you everybody for being here today for FyneConf 2023. It is fantastic to be in a room with lots of folk excited to be talking about this technology, with contributors who've been part of the project and people who've just learned about it for the first time today. We have a packed installment for everybody to be watching. And it's even bigger than ever before. Not only have we got more speakers, but I believe the number of people watching us from remotely is about 3 times the number that we had last year. So that's pretty exciting. It is a hybrid event, so for anybody in the room, if you weren't here at the beginning, just to remind you, there's no fire alarms planned. If the alarm sounds, we need to go out the main door behind us, gather across the road where we will count our number. There's toilets behind you at the other side of the entrance reception if you need them. Wi-Fi is available. It's visitor code base. The password is Castle Terrace. I'll edit this out of the final video so that we're not broadcasting credentials to absolutely everybody. But for those on the live feed, sorry that you can't be here to make use of that Wi-Fi connection. I'm very excited to be back with a great selection of speakers from around the community. A lot of people have put a lot of effort into recording, writing these presentations, and I've had the great joy of being able to segue with a little bit of information in between them. But just to get started, I wanted to have a quick reminder of really why we are all here. Fyne, the project, the graphical toolkit, is here so that it's going to be easier to build applications that just work anywhere. We can code applications, have them run on any device without any libraries or setups. So easier for developers, easier for users. Overall, just a great experience. Something that can leverage modern languages and techniques and essentially lower the barrier of entry for absolutely anybody to get into application development for graphical user interfaces. As a benefit, we can make stuff that looks really great by default, and thanks to Go and building something on a more recent code base, we are able to leverage good engineering principles, promote best practices, and help people realize coding's not that difficult. And just because you don't understand how it's put together and your phone seems like a complicated thing, it doesn't need to be all that complicated. So to wrap it up, in a quote from our website, Fyne aims to be the best toolkit for easily developing beautiful native graphical applications for desktop, mobile, and beyond. And that beyond continues to improve and expand as we reach new devices, new platforms, and bust through new barriers. So before we get on to people's presentations today, I wanted to take an opportunity to reflect on what's new since our last event. A year ago, FyneConf 2020, I think we had just had released 2.4, and there was a lot of excitement about what was coming in 2.3. Well, it has been a bumper set of 9 releases. It's been a very busy year for everybody in the team. We had the 2.3 release and the improvements that came after that, and the 2.4 major release. So many features and 150 new fixes, I believe. This was a lot of work, I think. I mean, particularly contributors that we have in the room, Thilo, Jacob, and Chankan, and everybody who couldn't join us today, who you'll see a lot of. 28% growth in the commit volume on this year since last. And finally, the reveal of the graph there, that big orange number, is demonstrating that we're continuing to see excellent growth in numbers. GitHub stars, 4,500 more than last year, which put us not only past the 20,000 mark, but also the 21 and the 21.5, if that is a thing. We also expanded the community. We have a matrix server up and running now for people who don't like any of the social channels that we were previously on. And the apps listing site just last week reached 100 open source applications that developers have promoted from the work that they have been doing. And we also opened up an add-on site alongside that apps site for people contributing widgets, components, or other reusable elements that people can put into their own applications. And the FyneX repository, which was opened up just before the previous conference, if I remember correctly, has been growing really well. There's some excellent widgets that have been added to that, as well as layouts and other helpers that just take some of the load off what could be repetitive work in your project. And some of those are starting to flow upstream into the main toolkit as well. And we'll hear about some of those later today. So for the major releases, what are the highlights? 2.3, which was towards the end of last year, we had a great new theme update. It was refreshed with one of the designers that's on the project, helping us to feel just a little nicer by default. We added the cloud synchronization and storage APIs as well, which was explored in the workshops this morning to see how, with just one line of additional code, we can take an application that has data locally to share it amongst all of the devices that somebody might have signed in on. We had improved text handling. We've been very grateful to the hard work of other toolkits around, particularly people working in Geo and the text space. In the GoText project, that massively improved what was possible in our own work, so they've put a lot of effort in. And we also put work into things around the application. The menu icons particularly meant that we felt a little bit more at home, particularly on native systems where a richer menu experience was expected. We added more types of button importance, which I'll come back to, and image support into the rich text. 2.4, another UI polish, but this time facilitated by a member of the community who contributed rounded corners, which had been requested for a long time. And it wasn't until it landed in the project we realized just what a difference it can make, taking the sharp edges off buttons, and that's looking fantastic. We added emoji inline in text, so we can now bring another of those expected features to all of our applications. Table headers, layout debugging, I'll also come back to. And window drop handling was added, and so many more features. And we'll hopefully highlight just a couple coming here. There you go, lovely button importance levels in a Fyne demo version from 2.3. That's how it's looking. And I think I talked through all of these in the previous slide. The text handling meant that we could render complex glyphs to screen before, which is a big difference to what we were doing before when it was just kind of Latin characters. We also have a much better rendering pipeline that's come through, and that's going to help us to get into more international areas. Like I said, with a huge amount of thanks to the GoText team. The user preferences and storage can be handled now by the cloud. We have various providers available. Some are open source, perhaps proof of concept, others available commercially. But also you can build your own. You can implement a wrapper to get your API for cloud storage into a Fyne application and hand that off to anybody that wants to use your storage. The rounded corners and emoji and text, I mean, it just makes for such a nicer hello world experience. If there's a little smiley, the buttons are a little friendlier. And if you didn't realize already, that is why we have an emoji smiley in the 2023 in our logo this year. Just a little bit of cheer brought from a simple seeming feature in the toolkit. Like I said, I'll cover table and layout again. Window drop, thanks Jacob for putting that in. You can now receive items from external applications dropped into your window. And amongst other text handling, we added ellipses and more advanced versions of wrapping and truncation, with 35 other features in the most recent release. And that brings us to just a much nicer UI. It feels fresh. We could do more with the text handling. I didn't mention it, but there's an improved way of padding, which seems like a weird thing to call out. But the difference between padding inside and outside widgets had meant that things are better laid out. We tweaked the colors to accommodate this even more popping out of the box, just with great user experience. Like I said, we added table headers, where you can add them to your rows or columns, or both. By default, it is the letter and number format that you see. Dark mode's not coming out particularly well on the projector, but it's highlighted a little in the color there. You can set the labels yourself. You can set your own update header function, much like other parts of using tables. Or you could replace the header functionality completely with your own custom buttons, toggles, whatever it is, by using create header as well as update header. So yeah, great new table features. Layout debugging, I think, has been a real enabler. You can now see how your application is laid out, or why it's laid out the way that it is. So if you run your application with tags debug, it's going to render like this, and you can see the reasoning behind how it's set out the way that it is. We found this, I think, useful in the workshop earlier, but you could see on the rendering red borders around each of the widgets, which are labeled for the type of the widget, and the blue border shows the containers that they're within. And with that information in mind, you can see where the space is being taken up, allocated, or left behind. So that's a lot of stuff in the toolkit already, but the community has been absolutely phenomenal this last year. We have lots of new contributors to Fyne. I think I've lost count of the number of pull requests that we've merged in the last few months, where it's been an opportunity to say congratulations on your first pull request to Fyne. So that is really excellent to have more contributions from around the world. But also, and I think sometimes maybe even more difficult or a harder job, is the amazing support that people have given on our community channels across Discord, Slack, Matrix. If you wander into one of these rooms and you have a question or a bug or just can't figure out what's going on in your software or what to look for, there's always somebody there to help out with a helpful suggestion, an experience that they have been through, or maybe even a repository where the solution is spelled out and you can make use of and learn from there. Like I mentioned, the FyneX repository is increasing, great new features in there. But also I think, sort of for the first time, we started to see a lot more of this being used commercially, and the people who are building their business on this technology are being fantastic at giving back as well. And so I've mentioned a couple of items in passing already. Mindpoint Group have done a lot of really cool stuff in-house with the technology, and it was them that needed more advanced functionality in tables, so they sponsored the work for table headers and a few other items that support that. So thanks to them. The Daimium company, although I can't say much about them, I think they're still in stealth mode, had need of some bug fixes and were really helpful to getting us the hardware necessary to make sure that that was possible. And as you'll be well aware, we're solving a lot of cross-platform challenges, which means there's a lot of platform-specific issues, and they were able to help us out hugely there. And also, I want to call out Dentagraphics as well. They have some pretty cool back-end software on machines that nobody's looking at, and they needed to have constant rolling self-update for their software, and they sponsored the creation of the self-update work that's been useful in various different areas. So I think, in summary, at least for me, this really is the most exciting time in Fyne's history to be getting involved. There's more people around, there's so much functionality out there, and it's inspirational to see what people are building, and we'll see a lot more of that across the day. And so that is, I suppose, to say welcome to FyneConf 2023. We've already had a really great morning of workshops and discussions. It was great to see people learning for the first time or building on top of their existing knowledge. And I think we even got a pull request on the code that we were working on to show how the functionality that was being created in the session could be improved for a next version. So thanks everybody for contributing there. We have an excellent afternoon of presentations ahead. A lot of people that have contributed weren't able to be here in person, so they're either dialing in remotely or they have pre-recorded. And for a few folk, particularly all the way around the other side of the world, they're not able to join for Q&A sessions, but for most presentations, we have an opportunity to ask questions at the end of each presentation, and we are going to wrap up the day with a session on Jitsi, a platform for community discussion, and hopefully we'll be able to get that synchronized between the room and remote participants. We'll be able to chat through whatever comes to mind, what people want to know or suggest for the toolkit going forward. Please do, for anybody attending remotely, log questions as we go. We'll be trying to monitor our socials, which I think is Slack, Discord, Matrix, what was formerly called Twitter, YouTube, and I knew I'd forget one, Mastodon. So somebody is looking at all of these places if you want to log a question during the presentation, but we'll try and answer them at the end of each session. It wouldn't be possible to be here today without the sponsorship of a lot of people. I've mentioned the community and the work that's gone into making it possible, but it would be remiss not to mention a thank you to Codebase, who have hosted the venue. Fantastic to be in an event space with you lovely people. They have provided us the facilities, and the wonderful Megan earlier and Sarah this afternoon. So thank you everybody for your help. We have enjoyed some lovely food from Tasty Buns, who are also part of the Codebase community, and that was sponsored by Fyne Labs. I'm going to try and not bore you too much with what everything is being done at Fyne Labs and how we integrate with the community, but it might come up later. And of course, we're just here to try and help promote it going forward. That, I believe, is our welcome. Congratulations, we have made it through. If there are any questions about the releases or the things that I've covered just now, I would be happy to jump in. And after that, we'll juggle some AV and try to switch to our first presentation that's coming in, was recorded remotely. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Perhaps not a question-rich topic anyway, so. So, have to bear with me, I'm afraid. I've got a list of the steps I need to make to juggle between the different setups. But with any luck,
Hello everyone. I hope you're having a great time at Fyne Conference 2023 so far. My name is Rinaldi, and today I'll be talking about conversational UI with Fyne, which is essentially a talk about how you can craft a ChatGPT-powered app for multi-platform engagement. My name is Rinaldi, and let's get into it. So, just a bit about myself first. I am currently a software engineer at Seek Limited. I am currently 13 times AWS certified, 2 times Microsoft Azure Expert certified, and also 7 times Google Cloud certified. My personal field of interest is within artificial intelligence, as you can tell, pretty much from my presentation as well. But I also love a lot of cloud-based developments, and we'll see a bit of that as well within presentation too, and also within project management as well. And on the side, I also run meetups, hackathons, do tech talks, and I'm a VR tech enthusiast. So let's run through the agenda for a bit. To start off with, I'll introduce you to Fyne Chat, talk a bit about why we want to Fyne Chat, talk a bit about why we want, in general, what is conversational UI, what is the future of that, and afterwards, we're going to be talking about planning for functionality and how we will eventually integrate Fyne into what we're currently doing. Next, we then will look into how we can integrate the cloud and ChatGPT together to be able to work well with Fyne. Fourth, we'll then talk about how we can code this all up, and I'll show you snippets of code essentially of how it all works so that you get an idea more or less of how it all falls into place. And finally, we'll then talk about the future of conversational UI for Fyne. So, as an introduction, I'm pretty sure that no one here is a stranger to the term generative AI anymore, because no matter where you go, you'll hear it here and there. You hear terms ChatGPT, Google Bard, and now you've even heard about maybe Amazon Bedrock too, because recently Amazon came into the fray, releasing their own version of generative AI for general public. So it's no stranger to anyone, I'd say. And conversational UI certainly takes up a big stage in that, because it's all about how you can interact with interfaces and also how AI can, in general, enhance that. And within the project we will see today, we will see this in action, and we will see how this creates as well a paradigm shift within the digital realm, how it's able to change the mindsets of many people of like what we think conversational UI should be, and how we see this moving forward, of course. And aside from that, this all helps us to, in general, be able to foster more natural and intuitive interactions. So, what is the impact on the application landscape at the moment? We currently see that there is a big revolution in user experience, because the way users are interacting with our applications are definitely changing. It's no longer the standard chatbot with predefined responses or the standard UI templates essentially. Now we have ChatGPT, we have Bard. These generative AI help us to tailor our experiences and talk as if they are other people as well that are talking to us too, like a customer representative. So it is actually amazing see how it's actually impacting the applications that we currently have today. It really does create that human interaction, as I mentioned before, and it definitely creates a broader transformation for the application landscape as well. It's really branching out to many different industries and many different applications. So, what is Fyne Chat? Let me introduce that to you. Fyne Chat is essentially a fusion of AI, in this particular case ChatGPT, and the Fyne Toolkit. And what this means is that it is the birth of an innovative open source project which utilizes Go for development, but essentially takes the best parts of Fyne and relevant toolkits as well that Fyne offers, so that it's able to make the UI more interactive, provide a better user experience, and in general, just enhance the normal Go experience that you would have otherwise. So when I first started planning for functionality, I thought, what would I want a conversational UI to have? And keep in mind, we want to design for an MVP that is more or less able to cater towards many use cases. We want it to be able to be tailored towards different users. We want it to be able to help people more or less in solving many of their problems while also keeping track of the conversations as well. So, of course, starting off with that is a normal basic AI chatbot. But then I thought, what if we can essentially put into place sentiment analysis as well, and more or less try to analyze how the user is feeling and tailor responses accordingly too. So that's particularly where I then decided to connect to one of AWS services, which is AWS Comprehend, and we're going to be talking about that a bit. But essentially, I want to be able to have sentiment analysis done based on the user's responses, and of course, provide as well a topic suggester as well. It also is powered by AWS Comprehend, but what I want is essentially to be able to capture what the user is currently interacting with the AI about. So it captures the biggest trends, it suggests current topics based on that. And we'll see this in action as well when I get to the demo too. So how does Fyne and FyneX integrate into this? Well, firstly, we built the foundation with Fyne. Essentially, we create the elements, including the window that is basically based on Fyne for our conversational UI, and also make use of other components as well. And we'll get into that later too. Some of the other developments we've done with Fyne as well with this project is essentially within creating the layout and the theme too. I tried to emulate a more modernistic design, and this was pretty much accomplished based on Fyne. And I also was able to more or less make the UI more scalable as well because of Fyne too. So what Fyne really managed to do is really help to make the development of this particular app more scalable in terms of how it's able to be responsive in terms of different window sizes, for example. And that's exactly what we want. We want the user to be able to have a great experience no matter what kind of window they currently have. And here more or less is just a mention of the kind of components that I used. I also attached definitions to them as well. And more or less, it's pretty much, yeah, if you're used to developing a Fyne already, these probably aren't really a stranger to you. These are pretty standard ones. So yeah, pretty much just like using like app window, creating windows, like pretty much like setting new sizes with new size, text align leading, text style, text wrap word to pretty much, yeah, set the word wrapping for label text within the AI generate content. And also, well, of course, when it's displayed, and also the canvas as well, which, yeah, pretty much gets the size of the window too. And we also make use of containers too. So more or less in this case scenario, for example, new V scroll, which, yeah, essentially helps to create a vertically scrollable container around the chat label. And aside from that, using new HBox, which helps to create a horizontally aligned box container to hold the buttons, which helps in making them look good, essentially, when we look at it in terms of the UI. And aside from that, we also use new border as well, which creates a new border container to hold the input field of the chat itself and the buttons related to what we're going to perform later in the demo as well. And also new grid with rows, which essentially creates a new grid container with specified rows to, yeah, arrange the chat container as well and the input buttons container. We also made use of some widgets as well, which includes new entry, new label with style, and new button with icon. I won't get too deep into this, but essentially it's just a showcase of how Fyne is being integrated into this, including with the creation of new button widgets and yeah, particularly essentially just being able to create new labels based on it too, with the new label with style widget that's being used. So the integration with the cloud is actually a very simple integration, nothing too complicated for this one. What we do is we're just basically calling the AWS Comprehend API. So we're just basically making a call to the API, and it sends the response based on the classification that it has made for the sentiment that it has been sent through based on the text. And essentially, for this particular case, and for this particular demo, I'm just going to be showing kind of like a demo between them two, and comprehend just classifying between 3 different possible states, which is positive, neutral, and negative. So based on the text, it classifies based on this, and it then passes it on to ChatGPT to be able to then process it and accordingly adapt its responses well too. So we're not only making a normal generative AI response, we're making one that is contextually driven based on the user's mood as well, which really helps to better prepare the user to be able to interact with it. So now let's get into a bit of the code. So to start off with first, we want to be able to create the window of the application. And as you can see here, it's quite a chunk, but when you actually look at it quite closely, it's actually not too deep. If you're used to developing with Fyne, a lot of this will be quite familiar to you. So to start off with, we firstly essentially more or less just like declare a window. We more or less, like having a new window. We more or less use a new entry as well, particularly, and set a placeholder too, so that we can essentially start putting a input box for us to start typing messages to. We want to be able to create buttons as well. That's why we have the send button, for example. We use widgets for that. Essentially, we create 2 different buttons in this case scenario. We create a send button, which helps to send the message, and a suggest topics button, which more or less helps to return the suggested topics that are currently being already tracked by AWS Comprehend, essentially, when we actually request them for topic suggestions based on our conversation so far. And pretty much aside from that, it's just implementation of containers to be able to hold them, while also making sure that the content is being displayed well too. We then want to create a sentiment analysis function. So in this particular case scenario, we're more or less just creating a new AWS session. As you can see over here, we are pretty much just declaring the region, just declaring a new AWS Comprehend session, and detecting the sentiment input as well as part of this too. So we're preparing the request object, then we make the API request based on the text that's currently already formatted accordingly based on this, and we just send it through, and after that it more or less just sends back the sentiment to us. It's a similar logic with topic suggestion as well, but we're sending through these kinds of things with a different goal. In topic suggestion, we want to be able to detect the key phrases within our input. So we're trying to find commonalities within our current text. And with this, we're using detect key phrases input, particularly from comprehend, and more or less just making another API request as well to be able to detect the key phrases as appropriate. And more or less just returning it back to us, so that when we actually do request for topic suggestions based on what our conversations have been so far, it'll be returned to us. Now comes the fun part. We code up the send message function, and this is the big one, because we more or less try to create the function to be able to send messages essentially. So in this particular case scenario, I'm not showing everything of it because a lot of it is pretty self-explanatory, but I'm showing the important parts of it so that you get the gist more or less. And what we do here is we firstly want to construct the messages and prepare the request body for doing the API call. And afterwards, we then we want to include a system message, which serves as a prompt for the AI, which basically in this case scenario, in this demo, we're showing that how it can behave, for example, as a helpful travel advisor that is able to help us provide tips and tricks for travel usage. And you are essentially the user here, and that's why your messages are being displayed under user. And we are passing through the request body with the GPT 3.5 turbo model. And of course you can, use like different models as well. Like for example, GPT-4, which definitely will get you more accurate responses, I'd say. But in this case scenario, we're using GPT 3.5 and we're passing that through, and we're creating an HTTP request for the OpenAI API. We're passing that through. We're essentially using a post request towards the endpoint, and we set an authorization header, we set a content type header, and we send a request over and accordingly handle the response, with the window then accordingly updating based on our the response that is returned to, so that we are able to see the response directly on the screen. And in reading and parsing the body, we can see how we particularly are doing this based on this particular code. So we're basically just picking the best choice out of what is returned from ChatGPT, and we're just essentially mapping it accordingly and updating the chat UI as well with the response, so that we're able to see it in action when we actually do look at it from the interface itself. And now we'll get into the demo. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to be showing a short demo of more or less how this all will look like when you put it into practice. And here we have our Fyne chat window. So as you can see, more or less, this is a UI that is designed based on using Fyne, and it's, as you can see, it's pretty basic. It's not too decorative yet or too modernistic yet, but regardless, it still shows the capacity of what Fyne more or less is able to do in terms of making conversational UI. So what we want to do here is essentially we just want to give it a shot and see more or less how it pans out. So for example, I can say like, hello there, like, and we'll see pretty much like what that gives out. And it's able pretty much like from, as you can see, it's able to classify directly from my exclamation mark that is like a positive kind of vibe. So yeah, pretty much it's able to more or less also like respond accordingly to like in a positive way too. Then maybe like let's try a less upbeat way now of like, for example, say like, tell me about yourself. Now we send that, and then it's able to classify them as neutral. So it's more or less able to also tailor response based on that too. So for example, let's say like, I am looking to go to Rome, and pretty much, yeah, it's going to accordingly, yeah, as it should, like, yeah, talk about like Rome is a beautiful city with a rich history. So it's able to more or less do that. And now let's say, for example, if we want to actually have our common topics more or less like actually suggested to us. So for example, in this case scenario, we don't yet have any common topics. But if, for example, if we say we want like, so what are great recommendations to do there? Great recommendations of things to do there. I love hiking. And pretty much we're able to put that. It's positive sentiment. And yeah, pretty good. Recommend something, then we can actually have it recommend some stuff to us, and it's actually able to capture the common stuff now. So that's just a demo of more or less like what it's able to do. So what does the future of conversational UI look for Fyne? Essentially, the future is really bright in terms of conversational UI. We have the potential to be able to create powerful conversational UI with this, and this is just the beginning. Right now, we're already seeing a lot of projects that are able to leverage generative AI for many purposes, but there is the huge potential for Fyne because one of the biggest topic areas right now is adaptive UI, which basically is all about the potential for AI to help generate an adaptive UI for you. So for example, say if you prefer a particular style of how your UI wants to be, your AI can essentially generate that particular style specifically for you based on that. So that is a very big thing, and that'll definitely help cater towards many users based on their own preferences. And aside from that, I feel like I would like to also cast a vision as well for future innovations. That is one of them. And another is more or less how the Fyne community goes on ahead from here too. Because I believe there's a lot of things that we have to be able to gain from this, to be able to more or less innovate for. And that's why I feel engaging the community as well for collaborative development within this area is very important. We've seen this development in many areas, but not so much on the Fyne area yet. So I would like to personally just put this as an invitation for more development from the community, Fyne community, to see more use cases, explore more different ways of how you can implement generative AI into your projects, and more or less strive towards the vision of adaptive UI and maybe even more, maybe even greater things. Like, it's definitely a big thing, and it's going to continue being a big thing. So what are the key takeaways from this talk? Well, firstly, it's all about the conversational UI paradigm. It's all about seeing how far we've progressed and how it has changed how we interact with UI in general, and how it has the potential to adapt towards our own use cases. I'd say that there is a huge area still left to be explored from this, and the Fyne community has a lot of tools, a lot of potential for being able to help pioneer that future. Because with the current tools and components that Fyne has, we have a lot of work to do in terms of being able to make that adaptive. And we have a lot of potential as well in being able to do that, because we already have the tools to do that within Fyne. So that creates a lot of potential within that. And of course, because of that, we have a lot of great possibilities to be able to create powerful conversational interfaces that you can work with and that we can continue utilizing for various purposes. And of course, as part of this as well, it's very important to create a continuous culture of engagement and learning, because at the end of the day, that's how we're going to create a great impact for the community and to be able to really grow the community impact in terms of how we are choosing to innovate for generative AI and the innovations that we see from here too. So that is all for my talk. I'm happy to connect with anyone over my socials. I have my Twitter there, LinkedIn there, GitHub there as well if you want to see some of my work, or pretty much to see the source code for this too. And feel free to connect me there. I'm happy to take any questions as well after the conference too. And yeah, that's all for me for now. And with that, I'd like to close my talk and hand back to the organizers.
Now, if I unmute and connect to Zoom, then we should be able to have a conversation, but there may be an echo, so I'll try and juggle mutings. Cool. I think Rinaldi is just joining. Thank you very much, Rinaldi, for a really interesting talk. Can you hear us there? Okay.
Yep, I can hear you.
Fantastic.
Can you
Thanks
hear
so
me
much.
as well?
Yep, we can hear you great. You're on the big wall in the event space. I'm just trying to juggle muting so we don't get a big echo, because there's about 3 microphones around me at the moment, and I think if my audio comes out the other end, it might be painful. But now that I hear it, it's sounding okay. So maybe we'll just leave it unmuted. Yeah.
Right.
So thank you so much for that. I don't know if there's been any questions online just now, but open up to questions from the audience in person, if anybody had one. Michelle, on you go.
Thanks, that was a fantastic talk. I love playing with AI tools. I do it all the time in my work and research. And you showed some of the really great things we can make it do, but have you found any challenges or limitations with interacting with it in the sort of things that you do?
Sure. So firstly, yeah, thanks, Michelle. Sorry, I can't see you directly. It's a bit hard to see from this view, and it's always a bit frightening sometimes to kind of like address an audience where I can't see. Oh, beautiful. Thanks so much, Andy. Hello. So yeah, great to see everyone there. Yeah, sorry I can't be there in person, but yeah, that was a really great question, Michelle, and great to hear that you're already trying out your own implementations of like using AI tools as well. So in terms of challenges, I'd say that most of them really come from, I'd say, how you tailor it towards use cases, because one of the things I've always found is that AI tools are sometimes a bit unpredictable. One of the things is I always pretty much like have most of the time that I invest in is actually in prompt engineering, which is basically just trying to properly format and train the AI to be able to like respond to my particular use cases properly. So that was also one of the things as well when I was building Fyne Chat 2 that I had to face. I was trying to train the AI to be able to try to tailor it to be able to not go off the rails. And because oftentimes generative AI has a tendency, it starts to do what you call hallucinate in a way and start to actually make up things that might not necessarily be true and actually sometimes end up, kind of like getting you the wrong path. So that is like the main, I think the main challenge. And the other thing is, I would say, is also a challenge that I faced as well when I was actually trying to make Fyne Chat be a bit more adaptive. Because one of the things I was saying as well earlier in my talk too was that my goal eventually is to be able to build adaptive UI that is adaptive in the sense that you can tell it what to do essentially and more or less have it accordingly scale based on what you're already used to. Like, I mean, just imagine being able to have an UI that is able to scale accordingly based on what you currently are preferring. For example, have like the theme you have from Fyne accordingly change based on what you input, what is your normal, based on the themes that you have already picked in the past. So having all of that is definitely handy and dandy, but yeah, like based on my experience, it's still something that I'm continually still trying as well because it's continually changing. And yeah, basically it's, for me, I've been able to replicate it a few times, but yeah, it's basically continuously changing. So it's sometimes a bit unpredictable. And that's why I've been trying to combine with like a number of different tools. But yeah, those are the top two challenges right now I feel that I have faced so far.
Cool. Thank you so much. For myself, I'm a little bit curious, actually. There's obviously work that people have done with AI and trying to interact with it. I think even, like in my head, I imagine the OpenAI interface for ChatGPT, and so a lot of this is delivered through the web. So with obviously a biased hat on, I'm curious about how you found integrating this with a more graphical toolkit, and you know, was that a good experience? Any thoughts, I suppose, or feedback for the room? That just so you know, we've got contributors in the room as well. So is there something that you know that this was really well suited for, or something that could be improved to make it better for you and other folk in this area?
Right. That's a really great question. So I feel that one thing that definitely could make it a bit easier for development, I feel, is if maybe I'm saying this maybe in terms of Go first, because like for Go itself, one of the things that is a bit hard is that it's not as easy to work with, for example, like ChatGPT or some other foundational models I've already worked with before. For example, like I mentioned briefly, Amazon Bedrock. It's one of the other foundational model suites that I'm currently using as well. And one of the biggest difficulties I had was that you can't exactly use it as easily as using it from a ready-to-use library. So that is one difficulty I feel that I was facing before, and I feel pretty much a lot of if there is more open source development done within kind of like importing easy import of these foundational models, it'll definitely make things much easier. Because right now what I'm doing is I actually have to create an HTTP request for the OpenAI API, and it's same as well if I want to build it using Bedrock as well. I have to make an HTTP request because I don't believe there is currently an open source library for that yet. So that's kind of like a workaround that I currently have to do. And yeah, pretty much I think that's pretty much like on the API side though. On the UI side, I definitely feel that a lot of it has been pretty much, I feel like, very user friendly to be able to implement. And yeah, I don't think there's too much complaints from me from that regard, but yeah, I feel that pretty much it's been able to showcase the messages pretty well, and pretty much is able to more or less like have themes displayed pretty well. So yeah, I don't really have like much to say about that. And yeah.
Well, that's cool and good to know. I think there's time for just one more question. If anybody in the room has one. I've not seen any others pop up. No, I think we're good. Thank you, Rinaldi, so much. I appreciate that. Thanks for the video, and really appreciate you staying up to what feels like it must be a very, very early time of the morning at your nighttime there. So I hope that you get some good sleep, and yeah, thanks for joining us.
No worries, Sandy. Thanks so much for having me as well.
Cool. We're just going to move on and watch Paul's talk, and then we'll come back to the Q&A. No.
Hello, I'm Paul Brown, and I'd like to tell you about the diagram widget, a mechanism for adding interactive diagram editing capabilities to cross-platform applications built with the Fyne toolkit. The widget is an extension of work begun by Charles Daniels a while back. Applications incorporating interactive diagrams are typically managing some kind of underlying information, some of which is displayed in diagrams. In these applications, the relationships between the underlying information and the graphical elements of the diagram tend to be non-trivial. We will start by taking a look at the architecture of this type of application and an example application that illustrates some of the complexities involved. We will then examine the diagram widget itself, highlighting and demonstrating its features. We will conclude with a brief look at the provisions for extending the behavior of the widget and its nodes and links. Applications employing interactive diagrams typically manage an underlying set of information, such as a model of a design. Different views of the information are presented, through which the information may be both viewed and edited. For example, a graphical interactive development environment, or IDE, may present a hierarchical view of the design, one or more diagram views of the design, and the attributes or properties of a selected design element. To better understand the mapping complexities, let's take a look at an actual application. Here we have an IDE for the Concept Representation Language, a research language exploring a minimalist metamodel for representing designs. The underlying model is implemented in Go, and the entire application is built with the Fyne toolkit. The IDE presents three views of the design: a tree view of the entire model in the upper left, one or more diagram views on the right, and an attributes or properties view of selected model elements in the lower left. The diagram elements comprise nodes and links, each of which is a view of some aspect of the model. The diagram nodes have a fairly straightforward connection to the underlying model. Each represents one of the concepts of the diagram in the model. The links, on the other hand, have a more complex relationship. Consider the ownership of the model element by the model. In the tree view, this relationship manifests as a parent-child relationship between the tree nodes. The properties view shows the relationship as simply a pointer that the model element has to its owner. In the diagram, the relationship is a graphical object connecting the model element to the model. So let's try this in more detail. I have the ownership relation here selected. If I drag it to another object, notice the perimeter highlights in green saying the connection is allowed. And now I look at the tree, I can see that the model element is no longer a child of the model. But if I open up this class here that's the diagram view, then lo and behold, the model element is now a child of the diagram view. So by moving the end of the graphical object to a different object, I've changed the ownership relation in the underlying model. And of course, if I put it back, then it is now, once again, a child of the model, which is where it belongs. Other things we can do is edit information wherever it appears. So we've called this a model element here. I can actually edit the name of the model element. And if I select that model element, we notice that the name is also now appearing, the edited name is now appearing down in the label here. And if I change it back here, the diagram updates automatically. And of course, it's changed in the tree view as well. So we get the edit anywhere capability. At the moment, I haven't got the editing turned on for the tree view up here, but that's a straightforward Fyne widget exercise here. Now let's look And some other things that we can do. Any place in our model here that we find a diagram, so I've got another domain here I call the house domain, and I have a diagram indicated by the D here. Then I can show the diagram, and this is actually another diagram widget appearing over here. I'll create a concept called, let's call it a house. And I'm going to create another concept over here called a kitchen. And if I look at my model on the left here, in my house domain, I now have a house and a kitchen. If I want to establish an ownership relation there, then I can take this element off of the taskbar. And what we've just done here, this is a taskbar. We created an element by selecting an element off the taskbar, clicking in the diagram, and creating it. Now we're going to create a link between them. And this is an ownership link. And if I move the mouse over this object, it highlights indicating this is an acceptable starting point for this link. I can now click the mouse, drag up to the other object, and notice it's highlighted in green now, indicating that it is an acceptable target for the other end of the link. If I let go, we now have not only have the graphical link established here, but if I look back in my tree, I have to open up the house, and I can now see that the kitchen is the child of a house. Now there's another kind of concept that illustrates some of the capabilities of these link relationships. Ownership, any object can own any object in the model that I've got here. Well, there's a particular kind of object, it's called a reference. And there is a kind of link that indicates the kind of object that the reference points to. And so if I select that, and I move my cursor over these other objects, notice they're not highlighting, but if I move them over to a reference, the reference is highlighted, which tells us that we can start that kind of pointer from this kind of object. And I'll click, and then I'll drag over here, and any kind of object can be the target of that, including another link. So if I notice here, see the red X, or the green X that highlights in the middle. If I let go, I'm now making a reference to the ownership pointer between these two objects. And as I did before, I could take that end and say, oh, this is now a reference to a house, or this is a reference to a kitchen. So some other things we can do here, if we go over to the house domain, let's add to that another diagram. So we'll call this an alternate view. And notice there are no concepts in there to begin with. But we can get them in there simply by dragging them over from the tree. So let's grab the house, and we'll drag it over into the diagram, and lo and behold, we have the house. If I edit it here, if I change the name of the house, let's call it House X. I go back to the other diagram. Notice it's House X here. And again, if it's selected, I can select it here. It's down in the properties view as well, and I can put the name back. Other interesting things that we can do, I've got a context menu here, and one of the things I can do is show owned concepts. And as we said before, we had made the kitchen a child of the house. So if I show the owned concepts, lo and behold, the kitchen shows up over here. And I can take this reference that we had in the other diagram, and I can drag it into this diagram as well. And then I can use its context menu to say, show me the referenced concept. And lo and behold, we get that arrow there. Now these are simply views. Even though I've got all the classes displayed here, I can go here and I can delete the concept view, and I remove the picture of the reference here, but it's still in the model and it's still present in the other diagram. So now let's take a more detailed look at the diagram widget itself and its capabilities. So there's more to the structure of the diagram widget than meets the eye. The diagram widget itself is the widget that is directly incorporated into the Fyne application. Under the covers, the diagram widget has a scroll container, and that scroll container is the parent of a drawing area, which is where the diagram elements actually appear. Now the diagram elements themselves come in two flavors. We have diagram nodes and we have diagram links. From an application perspective, these are being added to the diagram widget, so the application is not really aware of the intervening classes there. Now a diagram node can contain any canvas object, from a simple piece of text to a full-blown hierarchy of widgets. Diagram links can be adorned with graphical decorations, anchored texts, elements in there that can be little floating labels along the link, and decorations that provide a way to have arrows and other kinds of adornments on the links. Now links can connect to any diagram element, whether it's a node or another link. These connections are made via graphical areas that are referred to as connection pads. There's a default connection pad on each graphical element. For a node, this is a rectangular region around the periphery of the node. For a link, it is a point in the midpoint of the link line. The diagram widget itself manages all the user interactions involved in actually making these connections, and an application supplied callback determines which link pad connections are allowed. The default allows any connection, and let's play with it a bit. So here we have the diagram widget demo that's included in the FyneX release. Notice that we have different kinds of nodes here. In terms of content, this node has simple text in it. This node has a button. This node down here actually has a collection of buttons in a container. And so you can put whatever you want inside nodes. That's completely up to the application itself. Now nodes can be dragged around and resized. Notice that as we drag it around, the links are all maintaining their connections. If I select the node, I get corner boxes, and we can resize them. The minimum size of the node is determined by the minimum size of the content that you put in the node here. Links connect to nodes and to other links. So here's a link. This link right here is connected on one end to a node and the other end to a link. The connectivity of links is managed by the diagram widget itself. So if I select a link, I can grab an end and I can drag it to another node. So notice the nodes are highlighting in green, indicating that a connection to that node is allowed. The connectivity is determined by a callback provided by the application that determines which nodes or which diagram elements are acceptable endpoint connections for this particular link. And you can have different kinds of links. So not only can we connect to the nodes, we can also connect to other links. So I just connected this one over here, and notice if I move, move this node here, that the link remains connected to the other link. And I can put the end back where it was originally. Now links have graphical annotations on them, and in this case here on the red link, link 1, we've got 2 arrows back to back at this end, another 2 arrows at this end. So we can put multiple decorations at 3 reference points on the links, either end or in the midpoint. And on link 1 here, I've got a pair of arrows at each location. The decorations can be polygons as well. So here's a triangle polygon placed at the midpoint on link 3. Now another feature of links is that we can have floating text annotations. Here I have a label link 1. Now I say floating text. You can move the text around, but the relative position of the text to its anchor point on the line remains fixed as the link moves around. So notice I'm moving, the link is moving left to right, so is the link 1 annotation along with it. Now there are 3 reference points that you can attach these floating text to, the 2 endpoints of the link and the midpoint. And so here we have the source role annotation is connected to this endpoint. And again, as I move the node around, we see that the floating text remains anchored there. Typically, the labels or the floating text at the ends are used to indicate either the role that the node plays with respect to the other node, or in other cases, we can put multiplicity annotations on there, 0 or more. You can have multiple floating text or multiple anchored text annotations at each end. So I could put at this end both a multiplicity text and a role name. So there's a lot of flexibility there as well. Let's see. So as I said, we can put anything we want in here, buttons in particular. In the demo application, there is a simple layout algorithm that iterates using a spring algorithm. And this button here is connected to do one iteration of that algorithm. So if I click on it, we get movement of the nodes. This button here is connected to run the algorithm to completion. So I click on that and we get a spring-based layout in there. Now notice when I did the layout, node 5 kind of went off the edge of the page and we got automatic scrolling. So that's the scroll bar, scroll container that I mentioned earlier. And as we move things around, I can move, then the scroll bars will extend to cover the contents that's there. So a number of callbacks are provided to integrate the diagram widget into the application. We've already mentioned the isConnectionAllowed callback that determines the paths to which a given link end may connect. The link connection changed callback informs the application of connectivity changes. We saw this earlier when the ownership link changes were reflected in the model. In the earlier example, the mouse up callback was used to complete the drag and drop action from the tree to the diagram, and the onTapped callback was used to implement the diagram changes based on a toolbar selection and a click in the drawing area. Finally, the nodes and links may be customized by the application. All diagram elements have configurable set of graphic properties. The IDE example uses these to color some of the nodes, and the diagram widget demo uses them to color one of the links. Nodes and links are extensible in the same sense that other Fyne widgets are, but the initialization of these extensions is slightly different. This is because the relationship between the diagram element and the diagram widget itself must be initialized to enable the diagram widget to properly manage the diagram elements. So we've seen that the diagram widget can provide an interactive diagram capability to cross-platform applications. The messy graphical manipulations are all handled by the widget, leaving the application designer free to focus on application-level behavior. Callbacks provide the hooks to coordinate changes to the diagram with application behavior. It's easy to customize both the appearance and the behavior of the diagram elements. There's several useful links here. There's a link to a quick overview of the diagram widget on a YouTube video. There's a link to the example IDE application that we've been looking at. And finally, a link to the FyneX extensions themselves that contains the diagram widget. And I'd like to close with a thank you to Charles Daniels, who got this work off the ground.
Yes, thank you. Just juggling the microphone back on, hop back over to Zoom, and let's see if we can get this kicked off. Yep. That was the right button. It just appeared on the wrong screen. Oh, amazing. Thank you very much, Paul. That was a really interesting talk. We've had some great sort of astonished noises and good feedback. It's incredible to see what's been done. I mean, the complexity involved in that project kind of blows my mind. It's a whole piece of work in itself. So well done. We do have, I think, some questions lined up already. So if you can hear us okay, sorry, yes?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. I'm looking at the conference and I'm seeing my presentation, not anything else.
I think the live feed is probably just running behind about 15 seconds or something. So.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
I'll ignore that.
Well, I'm sure that you'll see the answer to your question that we're about to do now appearing in about 20 seconds, so you can know that you answered the right thing after the fact. Sorry, that's not really helping, is it? First of all, though, Sammy, who's watching on YouTube, well, first of all, he said, well done, that's fantastic work. That he was interested about the compression of menu items. He wondered if you were using custom themes or if you were playing around with padding and sizes and things like that to get the compressed view that you've had on that part of the UI.
Yeah, I basically just minimized the padding. I think I have a padding of 1. And most of the time when you're using diagrams, real estate on the screen is very valuable. So I made everything as small as I reasonably could.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes sense. That's cool. Thanks so much. I don't know if this was part of the original project design or not, but there's a lot of complexity to the diagram structure, the data model, I suppose. Was it with the diagram, sorry, with the output in mind that you created those structures, or is it I suppose just the data model and it's mapped okay into the user interface, or did one influence the other?
Well, I guess you got to give a little background here. I've been doing diagram-based user interfaces since the 1980s. Not my first rodeo here. And so we've built, at one time I was part of a research project whose aim was to take existing graphical notations for engineering software and turn them into user interfaces. Some of them turned out to be good ideas. Some of them turned out to be really awful ideas. But one thing I noticed as we went through this exercise, which started out on Lisp machines back in the dark ages, we'd spend a week or two discussing what next graphic notation we wanted to tackle. We'd spend a year building the application. And after a year of finally getting it to work, then we'd use it to try and design some software, only to discover this is an awful way to design software. Let's try another diagram. So going through that exercise repeatedly exposed me to a lot of the things that you'd really want to have in a diagram. Today, I think UML is probably one of the more complex diagram sets, because UML is actually multiple kinds of diagrams. And so what I tried to do was build the basic features into the diagram widget that you would need to build any of these applications that I've seen in the background. Not all of it's finished yet. The links right now are single line segments. The infrastructure is in place to have multiple line segments, but I haven't added the user interface to actually use that. So, you know, I've set the stage for doing some other things that I know that need to be done.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Are there any other questions in the room for Paul? We'll just see if any else have come up online as well. I actually was blown away by the full user interface comprising multiple different diagrams. I didn't realize that so much complexity or richness, I suppose, had been added to the application already. And the way that you had the data synchronized between all the places was really cool as well. Were you using the data binding functionality built into the toolkit, or have you rolled your own in the diagram widget as well?
All of the above. I use the for the most part, the data binding at the individual, I'm going to call it entry widget level, to trigger the mappings to the underlying application. And it is just a trigger that in any realistic scenario with diagrams and an underlying model, the mapping is far too complex for the basic binding mechanism in there. In other cases, I'm using callbacks. So a lot of the mouse activity in the diagram area basically results in a callback being called, and then the application gets to decide what to do as a result. So yeah, a lot of thought goes into that. I actually published some papers a while back exploring the complexity of the relationship between a model and a diagram in these types of applications.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks so much. It's good to hear. I suppose that variety is possible, but the built-ins are helping to build that out. Yeah,
getting the stuff you really want to build into the toolkit is the messy graphical maintenance here. You don't want to get bogged down trying to draw lines and move text around and that kind of stuff. So we tried to automate as much of that as possible so that the application designer can then focus on the relationship between the diagram and the underlying model.
Yeah, absolutely. Last moment for one question, if there is one in the room, or any. Derek, if you, I'll repeat it if people have had trouble with the room, but let me know.
Just making diagram apps for 30 years, I just want to know how well suited was the Fyne toolkit for it, and what pros there were, and if there were any cons.
Amazing. So this question didn't come from me, just in case anybody's watching and isn't sure. But with your experience in diagram widgets and presenting these graphically, Derek was curious about how you found the toolkit to be a good match. Was there benefits, pros or cons to what you found? And yeah, what's your opinion overall?
So again, a little bit of background. You know, many years ago, I started out having to build all this infrastructure from scratch. That's a royal pain. I've done a number of these in specific operating systems. I did an X Windows version. I did a Windows version. I worked in the Lisp toolkits on the old Lisp machines. So more specifically about Fyne, what was missing from Fyne is obviously the stuff that's diagram specific. What was there, almost everything that I would want in terms of the underlying rendering capabilities. One thing that's missing is dash lines, for example. Right. So and that's a common thing in a diagram, and I'm looking forward to being able to do that. Most everything else was there. The hit detection is close. I'm still having a challenge with the when you've got a perfectly horizontal or vertical link, and there's a 1 pixel wide line there, hitting it to select it is a challenge. I'd like there to be a way to drop a hint to the hit detection to be just a little sloppy, you know, and add a couple of pixels of slack in the selection. But by and large, I've been very pleased with what's there. Ran into some, I wanted to use EPS for the icons and couldn't get that to work, so I had to render them as pix maps and then put them in there. But that's a nit. There was a way to get the job done, and I got it done. Very pleased, and even more pleased that the work now gives the capability on multiple platforms, which was really my motivation for doing this. There's toolkits out there that'll do it on a limited number of platforms. The ones that are any good have a hefty price tag. The ones that are free tend to be kind of half-assed. So I wanted to get a quality one out there that was multi-platform. Anybody's interested in not only working with this or extending it, I'm happy to work with them to move this work forward.
Amazing, thank you so much. And I think if I just make a little tweak there, we can get a little round the room so everybody could show their appreciation to Paul for his time. There we go. Yeah.
Thank you all. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. See you later. We're going to head for a break, and then we'll catch up with some more talks.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Cool.
idea, but it was the best they did for a lot of long time. And it is so successful in companies that they are now designing it for every occasion.
Right.
So that's the first time when you are organizing a live conference. You have the default. Just one live.
We did. Yeah, we did 4 years online. This is the first one in person. Last year we were thinking about it, but two of the speakers were unsure about travel, so we thought we didn't have a critical mass. So now, yeah, this year. Yeah, I'd like for us doing it again, but we're trying to do it here again, and we go to where somebody else wants to.
Next year you got to welcome in Dublin.
That would be pretty cool. Yeah.
That's your fun.
Yeah. I think we're probably ready to get going again. Although everybody was here a minute ago.
That's okay.
Yeah, the Andy Williams on the slide is not the singer that you might have heard of, despite me liking to try. And on our projector, he looks sadly a little bit washed out. But I'm here, I'm quite healthy in person, so don't worry. So I hope everybody had a good break. Welcome back, and it's really exciting for me to be able to present something a little bit different than perhaps the libraries, the widgets, or the apps that I might have talked about in the past. Like I said before, I've been blown away by the creativity and the achievements of the software that people have created. And it led me to think, are there other areas that we could be working on a little bit harder? And so I started to think about operating systems and the benefits or not of those that existed. And so I'm going to talk to you today about FishOS, which is what I think a great developer experience. I call it on this title slide, and apologies for the cheesy joke, a well-rounded developer experience. You can tell me whether that's truly right or not, but we added rounded corners, if I didn't mention it earlier today, in a recent release. So there you go. It's already well-rounded. The question might be that you would have perhaps on your lips, another operating system? Really? Well, I mean that is a fair question. Why would we need another operating system? And I mean, yeah, maybe we don't, but there's a few reasons why I thought this would be quite useful or interesting as a project. We're building everything platform agnostic, which is great. These applications that we create are going to work on any device, but then we're stuck with a specific platform that's designed for other purposes. I might not have the same idea about what makes a good developer experience as a typical customer of Microsoft or Apple, for example. Also, one of the reasons a new toolkit is nice and refreshing is it doesn't carry with it the weight of legacy, and I think we could probably agree most operating systems do, and to some extent the user interfaces as well. So can we look at that? Can we make a great experience that's good for users and is good for developers instead of focusing on just one or the other? And can it adapt really well to the plethora of different devices that we have in a modern ecosystem, from the phenomenally high-powered, ultra-high density screens that you might have, interestingly, on like a studio display or in your hand, down to cheaper devices that might be embedded, they might just be older pieces of equipment that folk want to work with. And can it work beautifully with all of the modern tools instead of having to work with older technologies? And much like Fyne, can we promote good development techniques, learning, and lower the barrier to entry to creating a desktop operating system? That is the challenge, I suppose. The ambition, slightly cheesily characterized, is to bring back fun to desktop and to cross-platform development. So then FishOS was born. It is powerful and extensible. I hope those colors are really popping on any screens that are watching on the presentation. It's a little bit washed out, but I have some other ones to show shortly. It is built on the Debian Linux system. It's a stable release, so it's really solid, very well tested, and quite widely used. It's a great solid base. Everything that you see on screen, however, has got nothing to do with the low level, the underlying operating system. It is all Go. It is all built with Fyne, and everything that you see on screen there is a Fyne application of some sort. You might recognize, for the observant there, blue and orange is not normally the way that a Fyne app would be presented, but we have a global theme that fits the character of something that's just a little bit cheekier, a little bit different, but it is possible in extensible manner for you to decide what the desktop theme should be. This is completely customizable for your experience. Fyne Desk is the desktop application that's running the windowing, the sidebars, the panels. I'll talk more about that. It's a really cool project that's been around quite some time and similarly had lots of great contributions over the years. And Finn, the Fyne login manager, we'll see a little bit more of. We're able to distribute a lot of this through the standard apps system, and so we don't have to have one single system. We can have many small applications, and because of the low overhead to run Fyne-based applications, it doesn't really matter that they're not all part of the same binary. It's just going to work beautifully and fast. And modules provide the extensibility at the desktop level that anybody could get their code into the desktop quite easily. It does come in a light version as well. I just happen to only be displaying a static screenshot at the moment. And it will adapt to high DPI and to appropriate settings that users might have set up previously for higher contrast or larger text, those sorts of things. So that is what it looks like when you're running something. It's powerful, it's got all of the goodies going on, but it's also important that it is friendly, that it comes across as simple for anybody who's been in API design for any amount of time knows simplicity is tough, and at the user interface it is even harder. So what can we do to make this a little bit friendlier? Well, firstly, we can animate my little friend on screen, so he will bubble away as your system is loading, and you'll have a nice and simple login manager there. Other photos are available, better ones that might characterize yourself a little bit finer as well. So it's a friendly first boot type of experience. And like I said, the applications that form part of this are all distributed with the app listing platform that we have available. You might not know this, in fact, why would you? But the apps.fyne.io website has an API behind it. So the apps manager application is able to connect to it and discover what has been published. As we're built on Linux and we're very friendly with the idea of everything should be open source to improve learning, it's important that all of these applications are. So why not go to the biggest source of open source Fyne-based applications that exist? The app manager would, as you expect, help you to install, upgrade, uninstall your software, keep it up to date, and manage what's on your system. For people who are interested in having this experience for their own purposes, if you were looking to have a custom platform for your staff or for customers for some reason, we could whitelist or provide a custom app feed of the software that can be installed. So you're able to not just have the list of open source, but you could have your Office suite or your 5 applications or whatever version of here's what's acceptable in our organization. And because all of this is open and based on a customizable boot system that Debian has provided, it's possible to load that same application list into the construction of the installer itself. So when you install the system, it comes with your company or your set of open source software from that same source. I mentioned the theme. that is the theme. It's not, sorry. This is system-wide, but the user can also define what they would like to do. We've made use of the fact that Fyne understands a global theme file. It's stored in that JSON file, if anybody's interested in playing around. By default, it doesn't exist. The UI that you see is out of the box. But you can work on this to do whatever you would like. It's a standard format that the library understands for various reasons, but one of them is so that you can have a global theme that is not actually the theme that's shipped either by the library or by people that build applications. So unless their app says, I must have a different theme, it will use or delegate to this global theme that you've defined. The JSON file illustrated there is not comprehensive. If you just display white foreground color on all platforms and then some nice colors on light with one of the sizes changed, you might not have the most excellent experience. It's just there to demonstrate that you can have colors, sizes, fonts, icons like you would with the theme API, and we can specify them based on the variant, which is currently light or dark. For coders in the room who just want to be coding their own stuff onto the desktop but haven't learned how or haven't managed to do this with previous systems, the module API for FyneDesk is to run a function that returns a canvas object. And as we've seen earlier, that's a generic description for anything that can be displayed on screen. So I have three main module definitions: the status area, the screen area, and a launch suggestion. And the last one is a little different. But the status area, you can see on the top image, or the one on the right-hand side, any piece of application can contribute to that area. Those two images are the same modules loaded, but they can respond differently to whether the bar is in a wide format or a narrow format. So as you can see, they might hide detail, or they might orient themselves differently. And the screen area module is something that fills the gap between all of the stuff displayed at the borders. So that text file is a simple illustration of I can put files on my desktop background if I want by saying I have a screen area module and it returns a file listing for the desktop directory. Very few lines of code to add some functionality like that. And the launch suggestion, which is a bit harder to illustrate, returns for a given user search string which things you could suggest launching. And so I could show you later, you are able to launch applications, run queries, open browser windows and things like that from that launch. And the modules displayed in the status area understand it. So you could type for volume up or to connect to a different wireless network, for example. So that is essentially the front end to an operating system that I think could create a better development experience. It's friendly, it's easy to understand, but it is still quite based on code. And so I wanted to introduce something new today that can help reduce the barrier to entry for all of these things that I've already discussed. And this is called Fyne, or rather Fyne Micro, which is a small version of a visual app builder product. You can modify your application, and things like drag and drop and nicenesses will be a key part of that soon. It allows you to edit themes, layouts, containers, widget properties, all live in a user interface that is completely separated from the code for people who don't want to get into it. And this is an application built on top of Fyne, much like everything else. And it is going to be able to run on anywhere, but it creates applications that can run on anything as well. So this is going to compile native applications. You can install them onto your system, and you can run this software anywhere as well. Of course, FishOS is the best place to run it. It is focused on editing the applications on your platform and installing them to work on it. It can be capable of delivering them to any platform with appropriate upgrade to use a back-end infrastructure for deploying cross-platform applications, which you can read more about at one of FyneLab's websites. We are currently working with early testers at the moment on this product individually, as well as in the FishOS product at fission.app is where you can find out more. It is an open source piece of software, at least Fyne Micro is, which I'm going to show. And it is built around this design concept, which we're trying to deliver on, where you can load an application, configure it in terms of how it looks, how it behaves, but also you're only a little bit separated from the code at any time, so people can understand what's happening, dip into the code, and learn application development at the same time. So instead of being a no-code solution, we're trying to help people get into software through low code. You start with nothing too scary, and then you can dig into the details, whether it's a button callback, or actually that's a piece of developer code I want to look into. So as well as the graphical concepts, there are IDE concepts and file handling, more traditional things that you can get into. So because I am a little bit glutton for punishment, or I just want to tempt the demo gods, I'm going to try a live demo of what we have in place. So if I switch away from there, I'm going to launch this OS. Let me try and get that over here and maximize that. And oh, we have our little friend on the boot screen as well. Doesn't usually show for that long, I just needed to hold back while the VM booted. So we've got our little animation there, and we are landing onto the login screen that I demonstrated. And yeah, that's it loaded. So we have the bars that I was mentioning before. These are pretty straightforward little bits of Fyne code that are contributing to these modules, and equivalent of some kind of start menu launcher is available there. The more keyboard launcher that I mentioned you can contribute to through modules is this UI here. If I want to launch a hello application, just type hello. I mean, it's a standard concept, but if you wanted to type in equations or URLs, it would know the right thing to do there. But that's not really the thing I wanted to show you. This hello application, it's also in my sidebar up here. I can launch that by tapping on it. But I can also go here and I can say, I want to edit this application. Now bear in mind, this is a binary on the system. So native application is something that's been installed through an app manager. An app manager, much like this one in fact. So that, if anybody's familiar with the list of applications that we have on the website, you might recognize some of these names. Some classics. Quite enjoy myself a little bit of Minesweeper or FyneSweeper. So I could tap to install that application. And at the moment, a lot of this is being built from source on the fly. So some of these operations aren't super fast, but I can just leave that going there for a minute. And I'll jump back over to here. So this is a current version of this Fyne Micro that I was mentioning. I've loaded the hello application. You probably recognize the icon matches. We have some app metadata over here, which anybody who was on the talk for metadata earlier might recognize. But I also have this user interface file, which is a welcome label and a button. Pretty straightforward concept here. But if I just felt, well, I'm an expert in writing hello applications, and I use them a lot on my desktop, and in fact, I know that it's important to greet the people at an organization instead of providing a generic greeting. So I know FyneConf. I don't know if I was writing backwards, if my keyboard's flipped, but that was challenging. So my label here is going to greet people at FyneConf. Sure, I mean, we've seen this data binding we saw earlier. The diagram widget has done similar things. It's nice to have your data synchronized, but what does that really mean? Well, for us, it means we've just made an update to our application. So what I would want to do next is to install this new version of my software. Did I tap that? I may have summoned badness by trying to live demo this. Or it could just be running super fast. But that is not correct. Oh, we did get our little app installed though. Can go and play that in a minute. Why would that not? Ah, no, I think I know. I think I need to save my changes. And this, everybody, is why you don't do live demos. I can bring up a lovely terminal called FyneConf and just go and have a look at what's going on there. I think I have the project here. I think it's because the internet has changed or something's gone a little bit strange. It should have worked. So I will just say, well, actually what that's doing is it's executing this command. So I pressed install and I launch my Hello World application, and this is still loading the binary on the system. This is a native compiled application, but it is brand new. And I have done that through the magic of graphical editing of applications. There may have been a little glitch there, I don't know if you noticed, but nonetheless that's what it's set up to do, so that people can get in, interact with the applications on their system, make updates, do the learning, and contribute a better version of what they had installed. I'm not going to try and tempt this too much further, but if, for example, I knew how to improve a calculator, I could load my calculator application. Probably looks familiar for anybody who's seen one of our demos. And this button here, well, it's a clear button. It does something quite destructive. Well, I know that that should be actually a bit of a warning. So, well, maybe danger. This is a danger button. So let's make sure that's clear to the user. And whilst I'm here, I know that all clear is the word that they would use on calculators. So we need AC to represent what's going to destructively happen to the calculation ongoing. So we could therefore make those changes, install the latest version onto our system, and there you go, you have a better calculator than you did before. And you can tell your friends, or just keep it to yourself, because you have now a newer application than anyone else. And while we're here, you could of course use that little Minesweeper game that we installed off the App Store whilst we were here. I don't think I need anybody to see how bad I am at this game, but if I tap that, then we can move on. So there we have the features and functionality of FishOS, which I think is shaping up to be a pretty good experience for learning how to develop pieces of software on the desktop. And oh, an application didn't close. I'm going to just let that be upset about it and come back to the presentation. Completely flawless. Where to go next? I mean, what else can we do? It's all there. But actually, there's a lot planned ahead. The installer that I mentioned that could be customized to bring software that you want, it is, it's a complex thing. Formatting hard drives and configuring bootloaders, that's one of the things that we haven't actually replaced and is a little bit less friendly than it should be. And it should also be available to run on a wider variety of platforms than we currently have available. We need to build out the complete suite of programs. So I showed just a couple But there's lots that we can do there to make a more complete system built entirely in this way. And I think we also need a more complete system control panel so that we can have a friendly, easy to understand experience, even if you're doing complicated things at the system level. But if you're interested, please do consider getting involved. The entire thing is open source from bootloader all the way through to the applications that I've displayed, and you can find out more at that URL. That's where the source code for everything apart from the Fission app is hosted. You can download a bootable ISO and try it out on a virtual machine perhaps rather than on your hard drive, but it would be good to get feedback. If you're interested in helping flesh out this, it would be great to get some help coding these things up. We currently have login, file manager, text editor. There's modules that come together to make some of the applications, and a really early movie player, which actually has been made to look inadequate compared to some amazing community contributions in the last few weeks, but more on that later. But moreover, design ideas, feedback on what we've done. How can it be easier? How can it be better for a learning experience? There are various backgrounds, themes out there, but we're looking for more suggestions and contributions in the area so it can be really well polished. And do please join the FishOS chat, which I think exists on the Gopher Slack server and the Fyne Discord server. I'm sitting in there and waiting for really interesting conversations about what we can do next. And do please consider joining us over there and being part of what I think is a pretty cool way to get people into coding some more complex and complete applications, and knowing that everything you see day to day is completely editable. Thanks so much for your time. Does anybody have any questions on that? Well, anybody in the room? Yeah.
As it is based on the Debian, does it mean that you can install any Debian package, not necessarily with GUI, but from Debian?
Yeah, so the question was, being built on Debian, can you use the standard Debian package managers? Absolutely, you can, yes. So one of the things that I would like to do is to see the graphical app installation methods and the system app management methods to be integrated, so it's really easy to keep everything up to date. It may be that we take the app, we add to the app distribution by adding binary distribution, and it could be using the Debian repository method as well. So it may unify under standard package manager. As you saw, installing an application is not super fast at the moment because it's being compiled on the device there and then, not just downloaded from a server. So yes, you can install them, and we're looking to make it easier to discover both types of software, I suppose, with a user interface for managing utilities as well as the graphical apps. I think other than somebody suggesting that I'm having too much fun with the dad jokes, I think we're done with the questions for that segment. Perfect. Thank you very much for your time. I hope that was interesting. And I believe that next up we have Ash, who's going to talk to us about how he leveraged Go and Fyne for dual-purpose internal tools. So just bear with me whilst I juggle on this podium. Well, that is his slide, though. And a reminder, there's now like half an hour to 40 minutes to come up with that lightning talk inspiration that you would like to present a little bit later in this segment.
Hello all, I'm Ashwin, and I'm the co-founder and CTO at Ocular. We use AI and ML to help retailers achieve faster time to market with their merchandising processes and provide AI-based tools for helping them with your online sales conversions by empowering their customers with intuitive product discovery and personalized offerings. We've also been selected this year into the Techstars Future of E-commerce powered by eBay program, and we're very excited about that. It's an accelerator program specifically focused on driving e-commerce innovation. Now, in our tech stack, we've gone for an end-to-end serverless architecture. And in doing so, we have decided to use Golang in all of our non-ML related functions and internal tooling. So this leads me to talk about what we were trying to do, which led us to discovering and using Fyne. Now, as an early stage startup, we've been very conservative on how much we spend on our DevOps and the ML training pipeline. This kind of meant that we were still not quite ready to make an investment into some third-party tools that could help us with our ML model quality analysis and retraining. We had a very manual process, or we have a very manual process to measure and analyze model quality, which takes a lot of time. And then, therefore, the need to automate some of this was getting more urgent as we scaled the number of models we have. We identified that we could develop an internal tool, but we wanted to ensure that anything we did has minimal development and deployment overheads. So Go was an obvious choice to build out a command line based tool. So that we could easily integrate it into our tool chain. But there was also a need to provide some of this capability as an app to our data team to do some ad hoc analysis, as the case may be. One option, or one among the other options, was to build out the analysis tool in Go and expose it as an API, which a web-based app could call and use. But then we came across Fyne and realized that it could provide an easier option in creating a desktop-based app on top of the Go-based tool, using a single code base. In addition, the cross-platform compilation and packaging support in Fyne was excellent and dramatically reduced the effort required in creating the app for multiple operating system platforms. Furthermore, based on some constraints that is, I guess, unique to us in our situation, Fyne slotted in a lot better than other alternatives. So as I decided to build out the analysis tool in Go, and given that my UI development is not my strength, traditionally, I would have banked on another member of my team with UI skills to step in. Alternatively, I would have to invest a lot of my time to pick up the skills required using other frameworks or languages. But with Fyne, I found that it was a simple framework, yet effective, and my high-level familiarity with Java Swing from the past helped me to really pick things up. But the fact that when I used ChatGPT as my co-pilot, I was able to greatly accelerate my UI scaffolding code that needs to be generated. And that really sealed the deal for me. Okay, so this led me to try out Fyne. And the end result was that by employing Golang and Fyne and with an MVC-based architecture, I was able to easily create a command line tool and desktop app. In the code here, we created a controller that could be passed on to the command line mode or the desktop mode based on how the executable was launched. The controller provided most of the analysis code, and the views were associated with the modes. The Fyne code in the desktop view is very similar to many existing UI frameworks and is quite easy to pick up, even for a novice. There are containers, and each container has a layout, and the layouts can manage the widgets that you add into them. This is probably familiar to most of you, but if you're new to Fyne, you may notice that it's quite similar to other frameworks. We could essentially now turn attention to how this app runs in command line mode. There could be other modes that are related to using it in a tool chain. But for now, let us look at how the tool looks like in command line. When we launch it, we need to first load the data. To do that, we need to provide the path to the spreadsheet and the names of the two sheets with the original and audited data that we have. So this, once we do it, generates the report, and we can use the command and query mode to display other reports and views. So if we now launch the same executable in desktop mode, we get a very elegant looking UI. We can go ahead and try loading the data, which has already been preloaded. This time we do the same thing we did in the command line mode and basically point to the spreadsheet where the data exists and select the two sheets for the analysis. This will load and analyze the data and show the default report associated with it. The report is in the form of a table that is managed in one of the built-in layouts. We can now go ahead and show some of the report views. So now in the accuracy view, we're using a tabbed container that contains a table of data per tab. We can then query for the audit view, and this now shows a tabbed container with a list of cards with a table inside each card. Running through some of the tabs shows off the speed and responsiveness of the UI. In fact, if we select a category that has a lot of data, like the women dresses category, we can see that the UI is quite performant and as responsive with a lot more data thrown at it. So all of this was developed relatively quickly, especially as I was learning Fyne at the same time. However, I had some help. I did start experimenting with AI-assisted development for this. This is more a reflection of my own state of mind, as I'm not much of an RTFM type of person. I jump in to any new kind of code base or frameworks or languages, get into all sorts of twists and turns in the beginnings, but then slowly start untangling myself and getting proficient. But I didn't have much time to do that with Fyne. Furthermore, while the documentation for Fyne is great for getting started, some of the other nuances in the more complex UI layouts, it is still not yet fully baked in. Given the relative newness of Fyne, it was not something that surprised me, as I expect that the documentation is only going to improve over time and with community support. ChatGPT turned out to be quite the winner for me here. With some simple prompt engineering, it was able to generate relatively complex UI layouts and the scaffolding code for me. By scaffolding, I mean just getting the UI elements and the layouts and the containers all put in together. So I just kind of had to needed to add the dynamic code for executing the actions, mostly. Now, ChatGPT does hallucinate a lot, so keep this in mind. And it's also not aware of the latest updates of the Fyne framework, clearly, because it has data that it's been trained on since 2021, I believe, up till. But with that being said, it was actually good enough to provide me a lot of the what I call plumbing code. So let us have a quick look at what ChatGPT can do for us with the right set of prompts. If I were to input the details of what my UI needs to do and how I want it laid out, by say, for instance, saying that I need a query area for it, I need a certain container or a tabbed container to show the data in a table and provide the details and spec that out, it would then take this prompt and effectively generates the code and code structure for me. We can then walk through this code once it's done with its generation. You can see that from a code perspective, it's provided all of the key elements that's required, the ability to create the tabbed items, the table within that, the structure, the basic structure for it, the ability, the right way to start the framework, and it's all using it with the latest V2 framework that Fyne has. Now, the best thing to do is probably copy this code, and go ahead and experiment with it as a starting point. You don't have to necessarily use this to immediately start with your coding. You could just try it out, play around with this. Now, the thing is this, that if you don't find the structure very appealing, or maybe the code structure is not that good, you could try regenerating the code. Now, every time you regenerate the code, it kind of picks out different types of code structures, patterns, design patterns with which it tries to do the same thing. So it's a good way to perhaps even learn slightly some of the other different techniques that you could leverage with using Fyne and just the general design patterns themselves. Look, I still had a few issues from all of the code that was generated, things that I had to manually tweak in the UI itself. I've had to basically play around with the right layout, mainly so that the table that I'm using filled out into the container completely, as opposed to just showing the first row that happened out of the box from what code was generated. I guess one of the biggest issues I had was in also handling the column widths of the table dynamically based on the data set. That is a bit of a challenge that essentially I've had to dig into the internals of the Fyne framework to understand and use it better. Another aspect I had to figure out from all of this was also to handle the styling for the header row. Now, I understand that the latest version of the tables widget makes it much easier. It's very configurable, so I'm looking forward to using the latest widget, which, by the way, also shows the speed with which the Fyne community is continuing to improve and add to for already what is, I consider, a very impressive widget set. Anyway, but the point of all of this is that it would have taken me much longer to come to this level of functionality or create this level of functionality that you saw. And perhaps without the support from ChatGPT, I might have probably weighed in on going down the traditional path or given and get somebody else who has more UI skills and experience to come and work this out. I could have probably decided to use a web-based environment, but quite frankly, that meant I would have had to consider adding a lot of user authentication and authorization. And really, it would also meant two different code bases, one for the core and analysis functionality, other for the UI. And I'm not a big fan of having two different code bases, predominantly not from the development point of view, but from the maintenance point of view in the long run. So the thing is, this approach by using ChatGPT and just the general simplicity of the Fyne framework was super effective for me to get really comfortable with this and create a decent UI that I might not have prided myself in doing in the past. All right, so the Fyne advantage. So essentially what really helped us along here, I think I mentioned some of these traits already. It was simple to learn. It was definitely simple to learn without the ChatGPT stuff. So at least for me, and that perhaps might vary from person to person, but I think if you have a general awareness of some of the other frameworks, it's easy to pick up. It already has a good set of widgets in the library, so you could do a lot of clever stuff or a lot of nice looking UI stuff out of the box with the widgets that you have. The winner for us is, quite frankly, the fact that it has fantastic cross-compilation support. It also uses this add-on project called FyneConf for it, And that helps us package it for different OSs in a professional manner as was required for each of those platforms. Go itself does a great cross-compilation support, but Fyne adds the power layer on top of it to ensure that it's packaged for by the requirements of that and not just creating binary for each of those platforms. And I've really found the community, while still growing and I think relatively small compared to other language or framework communities, it's extremely responsive, and that helped us a lot. So it's a huge plus there. Now, the advantage that was specific to us, I guess, is that, our code base was one now, right? So we had just one code base, mainly for all the command line style tooling, as well as command line operations, as well as the desktop app. It was easy for me to package it and deploy it to my data teams. They all were, a lot of them are on different OSs, some of them on Linux, some of them on Mac, some of them on Windows. So it is quite important on that aspect. And the fact that with the combination of a co-pilot, an AI co-pilot, if you have a development team of Go developers, they would all be quite effective in using Fyne for the UI tooling needs. So I guess I would like to kind of start closing this out by talking a little bit about what we'd like to see improve. None of these are showstoppers in my opinion. Documentation, I think it's one of those things that you'll always want to see more improvements to it. They have done a great job from a starter point of view, and it's very easy to get up to speed with the existing documentation. But I think a few of the nuances can be better captured, and perhaps it will be, and I'm just sure of it, as the community grows and the usage grows. So in trying to, the examples I gave before, and trying to making sure that the table column widths were properly calculated, so on and so forth. I think a little bit more documentation to help somebody starting with it could be better. But that's definitely going to change very soon. If you want to rely on platform-specific features, this is more of wish list, and I think people can debate on both sides of this point of view. But for instance, the file chooser dialog, it would be nice, in my opinion, if the file chooser dialog was much more as close to the OS in terms of its UX, as opposed to some of the more Fyne-specific UI there. The point being, some of our team members, if they're not too technical, they're a bit phased by trying to work with something new. But it's, again, a minor irritant. I think once you get used to it, you'll know how to work with it. But if it was having some elements that was closer to the operating system, like something that interacts with the file system, so on and so forth, it would be great. But it's not a showstopper at all, and it's just a minor irritant. Now, when it comes to testing, it was interesting. Most of us are on a Mac, some Linux, no Windows in our team, unfortunately. So our hope was that we could use VMs on our Mac systems to kind of test it for Linux, Windows. While it was true for Linux, it wasn't true for Windows. We had some OpenGL support issues. I guess the Fyne framework uses OpenGL, and in the VM environment, there wasn't an OpenGL support. I'm pretty sure it can be fixed. I tried to see if there's a ways to work around it, but I didn't spend enough time to come to the point where we fixed it. So we essentially couldn't actually test this on our Mac systems on a VM, Windows VM. So we had to basically go and find the actual Windows system to do it. So very minor things in terms of what we felt could be improvements to the framework, but all in all, it was a breeze developing with Fyne and creating the UI. So really, the conclusion for us is that if you have invested in Go teams, and even if especially Fyne should be your number one, at least option to look at in terms of creating desktop apps. Now, there are other advantages to it. Clearly, the apps that you create can be used on mobile devices as well. It wasn't a requirement for us, but that's an actual value-added advantage, that once you create this app, you can easily use it on a mobile. It is a responsive design, aspects of it are handled there, and that's something we'd like to tap into maybe for some of the other tools that we're doing. So it's not something we really needed right now. So if you're already invested in it, without a lot of rewriting of your code or doing different frameworks, you've got a tool that fits both desktop and other development. We intend to use Fyne for more of our internal tooling, and we suspect that this approach would be beneficial for others if you have similar requirements. And I strongly, and I do believe that as Fyne grows, it could be a very good framework for non-Go developers as well, especially because of its really good support for multi-device. So an app that you create here can easily be used, consumed on your desktop, mobile device, and even the web. And really, that's something that I wanted to conclude with. I hope you've got a sense for what led us in our journey to use Fyne. And maybe there are certain things that you could pick from it and see if that would be applicable to all of you as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ash. Unfortunately, he's in Melbourne, I think, and at this time in the morning, which is 3:30, I think, he's not going to be joining us for any Q&A. I think I am delighted. It was really nice to hear some feedback on what we could do better, because I was worried that it was just looking like I'd given him a script or it was propaganda or something. I'm glad he had a good time. But I'm glad that there were some things that we could be doing better. And I can answer on the Windows VM side of things. There's been chat recently that you can install a software OpenGL driver, and that will allow the applications to run without the hardware. But we do need to try and figure out how to make that a little bit easier, I think. Cool. Okay. That's, yeah, another great talk. Which won't close. So we're running just a little bit ahead of time, but I think that's probably okay. And so it's, I think, a good time to set up and run into the lightning round. So we've got 2.5 lightning talks. So these are shorter segments, and probably not really time for Q&A, but the second talk is by somebody who's not able to join us for Q&A anyway. And our first is from Jacob, who is going to be here and could be grilled later. So we'll go through these talks, and then there'll be opportunities for questions afterwards, and at which point we'll be going into a break anyway, so we can merge that into a little wrap up. Let me just check that I can, they're still recording the right parts. I think that's all looking okay. If I tap play, and then I think, there we go. Jacob, if you will take the controls.
Sure. It's there if you want. Or right. Just tap the keyboard. Okay. Well, so this is the state of Flatpak support in Fyne, or Fyne and the future of app distribution on Linux. But let's start with, who am I? So my name is Jakob Asén, and I'm currently studying my third year of computer science and engineering at Linköping University in Sweden. I'm one of the core developers of Fyne, and for the most part I'm maintaining our CI infrastructure and then doing some smaller stuff all over the place. And in my spare time I am a Linux user, I'm doing some amateur photography, and I'm also a trail runner. And I'm also super stoked to be back at FyneConf again for what I realize is the 4th year in a row. Yay. So let's dig into what I have to say. And as I said before, my talk is about Flatpak and why it's the future of app distribution and how we're integrating Fyne into this ecosystem. So why Flatpak? Well, it gives us a single package for distributing to any Linux distribution. You don't have to juggle any RPM files or deb packages. You can just compile your application once and distribute, or twice actually, depending on architectures, and then distribute it to all Linux systems, basically. And one of the best parts about it is that it's 100% free and open source with no vendor lock-in. And that last part is what I like the most, because Ubuntu has this snap package, which they're trying to shove down the throats of everyone, and they don't allow custom repositories, and they just want a core that's kind of closed. So with Flatpak, you can use, well, any existing repository or host your own repository. And on top of this, it also carries some of very modern features. So all of your applications will run in a consistent environment based in a container. So even though your application may be running on Debian or FishOS, or Fedora or anything, it will always have the same libraries in the bottom. And on top of this, it's also sandboxed. So your application, if it doesn't need network access, it won't have network access. If it doesn't need file access, well, as a security measure, it won't even have the possibility to touch the file system, which varies a bit from application to application, which we'll talk more about. But on top of this, the sandbox system also gives us what we've had on mobile for years. We can turn on and off notifications on per application basis and have a lot more control over what our applications can do. But then if we have a Flatpak, how do we distribute it? And the de facto standard for distribution has become FlatHub. So FlatHub is also entirely open source and quite easy to get started with. And when they recently pushed some new statistics, they have over 2,000 applications available, 3 of which are Fyne based, but more on that later. And a lot of them are both verified and maintained by the applications developers themselves. So for example, the Firefox application is maintained by Mozilla. My application is verified by me, so anyone installing it will know that they're not getting any malware or bad practices. With that, many maintainers maintain their own applications. They have over 1,500 collaborators, averaging around 700,000 downloads a day, and supports both x86 and ARM distribution or architectures. They're also thinking about future plans for allowing potentially paying or donating to applications. But then, how has support in Fyne improved? I had a talk about this 2021, I think, and since then, a few things have happened. For example, the settings file that Fyne uses to save the preferences that Andrew talked earlier about in the workshop, it no longer has to be passed through the sandbox for it to work. Each application have their own set of permissions and preferences, so you can change the theme, for example, independently for each application. I also managed to get notifications to work as long as you set the right permission bits. That needs to be improved, but more on that later. And Andrew also kindly added support for FlatHub as a provider in the apps.fyne.io page, and a fancy little download on Flatpak button, which I'm very happy about. And lastly, for this part, we have the Flatpak demo, which I've been maintaining, which provides everything you need to get started if you want to publish your application on, well, Flatpak or as a on FlatHub or as a Flatpak. But then, which problems do we see in Fyne that we need to address? So, one large part of this is we have no support for free desktop portals, and this allows the application to make runtime permission requests instead of hard coding permissions when you compile the application. So basically you can say, I want to open a file, and then instead of giving the whole file system as an access for the application, the desktop environment opens a file picker, we pick the file, and then the desktop environment just temporarily gives access to that single file that we picked. And we need to work on that. The same goes for notifications and so on. And we also need to support Wayland better, because we're currently getting this uses legacy windowing system. I should probably use the pointer thing. And that's not very nice, because that's my application, and as a user, I personally would be a bit scared when it says that it is unsafe, which I also think is a bit too harsh to call it unsafe. But oh well, we have more to work on, and the future will look brighter. So, which Fyne applications can you download right now? Well, as I said before, we have 3 applications available. Rimport, my application, it has seen 4,200 downloads in about 17 months, but perhaps even more interesting is Supersonic, one of the another core developer of Fyne, who's managed to get 2,100 downloads in about 7 months. And also Patrice, which recently got his scoreboard application up. And I think we should promote that one as well, because it's also a really good application. And that was what I had to say. So thank you everyone for listening. Let's look forward to a bright future with Fyne on Flatpak. If you want to reach out to me, you can find me as Jackals on Gopher Slack. You can email me at jackals@tutanota.com, or find my GitHub on github.com/jackals.
Thank you very much. And we're not quite on break time. I forgot to put an intermediate slide, much like this one, because we've got another lightning talk, lightning fast. Can't really promise that, unfortunately. Our next presentation is from Sami, who joins us from Africa somewhere. I can't remember where. Might be. No, I'm not going to say because I'll get it wrong. Let me just set this up to play.
Hello everyone, my name is Sami Akroun. I'm a hobbyist developer and doctor from Algeria. Today I will show you a work-in-progress application that I call Electronic Medical Records. It's an app that helps manage a medical practice, everything that a doctor needs in his office, like patient information, history, appointments, prescriptions, and so on. Okay, let's start with the password. Here's the main window. It's just a big doc tab. In here you can search for a patient, you can see the last patients created, or you can create a new patient. Let's start with this. We enter the last name, the first name, sex, and date of birth. This is the minimal required informations. Patient created. It's in a new tab. This is the patient tab. It's divided in 3 parts. On the left, you will have the history and the events. In the center, you will edit and modify the selected event. And on the right, there are other interesting informations about the patient. Let's start with a medical consultation. You can create events with this big button. Let's start with a consultation. Here we write anything we want, like physical exam, for example. And here we write a title. It will be the diagnosis. Let's say asthma exacerbation. Saving is automatic, or you can click here in order to save. Here is the title. After the consultation, we will make a prescription, a drug prescription. Okay, we will start. It's very simple. You just have to write the medication, the drug, how you take it, 3 times a day, and the duration. This is standard medical prescription. You press enter, the drug is added. We repeat the process for other drugs. Okay, and the last one, just for the example. You will tell me that we write many text, but you will see. Okay, the prescription is completed. You can reorder as you want. You can even use keyboard to reorder with Control plus the arrows, up and down arrow. And of course you can print. Printing is done simply by HTML and CSS. Here's the standard print template with patient name, date of birth, and the prescription. Okay, we write too much. So, what's the solution? Autocomplete, of course. We repeat it. Once you write the first time any drug, the software remembers it. So, it is proposed as autocomplete. Just enter, enter, enter. It is directly added. First character for Solupred, enter, 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 added. Ventolin. As you can see, it's very simple. Let's say also that this prescription is a kind of standard and you use it many times. You can save it as a model with this button. Here's the model. We give it a name, for example, like this. Augmentin plus Solupred, une catégorie, some category, sorry. We save. And next time you will want to prescribe these drugs, you just come in this menu, some category, Augmentin Solupred. Very simple. Same thing can be done for exam requests. I already created a template for chest x-rays. You just create and print. Okay, now let's see documents. Documents can be anything you want. Medical certificates, medical reports, invoices, anything. Each document type can be created by the user, and it has a different printing layout. This is the main importance of documents. I already created some templates, some document types, and you will see the scripting capabilities of document types. Let's say directly, this is arrêt de travail, so work leave certificate. This is completely scripted. You write the duration in days, let's say 10 days from today, and validate. Here is it. You have the content. The 10 days are inserted here, and you can print with customized printing template. As you can see, the title is custom, and there's this text that wasn't in the content. Let's see document types, how they are done. Here is that document type. You can insert variables with cross-dash syntax. Here you insert the doctor's name. Here you insert either cette patient for a female patient or ce patient for a male patient. Here you insert inputs jours. This is a variable called jour from the inputs. And here the starting date. Here's the script. It's simple Lua 5.2. You set a header for the dialog that display. Here you create a number input called jour. This is the duration that we saw. A date, and this is a checkbox. Here's the printing template. It's simple HTML with the same cross-dash syntax. As you can see, this is the date of the entry. For example, this is the patient name, the patient first name, patient date of birth, and here we insert the content of the entry of the certificate with parsed as markdown. And here's the last little line of the certificate. As you can see, it's very powerful. You can do anything you want. Each doctor of each specialty can customize its own templates and own document types. Okay, last thing now, and not least, images. You can add images to patient files and to consultations, like this from file. Let's see my wallpapers. Here there are. Okay, you can add it and you can visualize it. You can even add many ones. Here we are, as you can see. Each consultation can have its own images. Here, this is the images of the patient in globality, and you can transfer them to some consultation. You can do multi-select, export, or delete. That's all what I have to show you. There are many other things that we didn't see, like advanced statistics, financials, user management, and many other things. Thanks for watching.
Thank you very much, Sammy. And Sammy can't join us for Q&A anyway, like I said, but he is online, and I'm very sorry, Sammy, for not remembering where you live. There was a lot of good wows and reactions in the room when we saw that, so thanks. And this is the last opportunity. Would anybody in the room like to present a lightning talk? That's okay. I have a magic little fallback. I'm going to play this video. So it's a random selection of applications, projects that people have been working on for folk either who couldn't be here, didn't really have the confidence to present something themselves, or just look cool. Well, we wanted to promote it a little bit on the day. So without a huge amount of consistent description as to why this comes together, I thought I would just play this little video of some things around the community. So there you have a selection of apps from around the community, some which I think you've heard mentioned earlier today, and others which you might not have, but there's something about them I think that's quite interesting. I think we have a little minute if there are questions that people had from any of those presentations. We could take a moment there, but I don't know if anything had come up. Much appreciation, I think, online for the stuff that they saw in the lightning talk, so that's pretty cool. A couple of applauses from people remotely. But unless there's any burning questions right now, I think what we'll do is take our next break. Where's my schedule? There. Oh, yes. We're not running quite as far ahead of schedule as I thought, so there we go. Help yourself to, again, there's a few more refreshments left, and what we're going to do after the break is we're going to come back, do a quick wrap up, the road ahead for the project, and then there's a chance to do an open Q&A. Seems like we've got the video link working for people online, so hopefully we'll get some folk joining, and we'll just not tell them that there's some lovely beer chilling for once we get going with the question and moving into the social later on. But help yourself to a little break, and we will gather again in 15 minutes once again. And yeah, I'll see you back here then. I think, yeah, well, yeah, we'll get in that direction. I think somebody just went to the loo or stepped out for a moment, so give it 1 or 2 minutes and we'll get going again. Just aware that I'm now standing between you and those, oh, we're online, the other refreshments which might be available.
As soon as you're back, tell me I was gone. Yeah, he's on the way to. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, we'll go now.
Okay, I think it's that time. Like that time should mean something, I suppose. And now I'm just realizing I don't remember if I tapped record. I did, everything's good. I still have haunted nightmares of that one time that I got halfway into a talk and realized I hadn't pressed the record button. And it was streaming, but the resolution wasn't good and I had to go back and redo it. Anyway, so yeah, thank you very much everybody for being here today, online and in person. It has been a record crowd. The numbers that I've been told for the people online has been high. There's been some real banter actually in the YouTube live channel, which I saw a little bit of, so I'm glad everybody's having a good time even if they couldn't be here. I just wanted to wrap up really with where the project is going from here, as we've done for the last few years. What do we expect going forward? It's usually an opportunity for me to make stuff up on the spot that then commits us for the year ahead. But now I have got the eyes of other project contributors in front of me, or facial expressions, sorry, of other contributors. So I can't go too far down off-piste. I'll try and convey what has been discussed already rather than just make it up as we go along. So we are essentially going to continue along the release cycle of a major release every 4 to 6 months. With every open source project, people have time sometimes and then not others. It's difficult to just say, here's a release date, because it's more important to us that features are polished and delivered really well. Although we do like the rhythm of 2 to 3 major releases a month, so we're going to try and stick to that. And in between those times, a bug fix release roughly every month is helping us to keep on top of the things that are niggling folk in between times, if it's maybe a new feature or just something that has been discovered on an old one, possibly because an OS upgrade has taken us down a different code path. So we'll keep delivering those. If you are having an issue, raise it on the tracker or in the community and somebody will help to get on top of that. We are beginning planning for the 2.5 release. And in fact, we have, thankfully, already had a discussion in the contributor group about what that might include. And at long last, we've got the enabling of the text handling that was mentioned before to mean that we can really do some proper translation and internationalization work, which is going to be really important. It's unbelievable how much this technology is used in countries where the documentation is no good for them, and the language that is supported by the default fonts doesn't even handle. There are some pretty smart folk publishing workarounds that helps them and their community get on and work well with the tech that we have broadly released in English. Undo and redo support. I can't believe it. It's not been there for up until now. Actually, it's really exciting because that has landed already. Darwin has, in their first PR for Fyne, actually, just gone ahead and implemented that for us. So it's not just we would like to release it. It is coming if you want to use it. It's in the unreleased develop branch already. So that's pretty excellent. And also the Wayland support that was mentioned in the Flatpak talk as well. Thanks, Jacob, for keeping reminding me. It's Linux latest technology on the desktop. We need to get there, and there's been a few internal implementation details that were needed to resolve before we could. Now we can, so that's one of those expected to be delivered in 2.5 releases features. And also, the experience on mobile is something that we're going to be improving, spending a lot of time on. It works absolutely. It's a fully supported platform and things function correctly. The tools that we've explored mean that you can get your app there right away. But it doesn't have quite the polish and performance of the desktop platforms. It's perhaps just needs a little bit more love. And some of the keyboard handling, there's been a few bugs raised recently. We're going to get on top of that. And I'll touch on that a little bit more. So yes, what are we doing in translation? What's going to be possible in this upcoming release? Well, more languages are going to be supported than we currently do out of the box. There will be an API for applications to understand the current locale of their users. So something along the lines of where are they based, what are their language expectations. That is going to be necessary for the toolkit, but also for applications to present things like date pickers, language selections. And as it turned out, as we got into the detail of how do you render text well, it's not just a case of looking at the characters and drawing them on screen. You do need to understand the user's configuration to hint at how text should be rendered, which kind of blew my mind when I realized. So we're working on that. And because we can't bundle fonts for every language in the world, we're pulling in support for accessing fonts on the existing system. So in a situation where it wouldn't be possible to give a consistent font experience anyway, we're looking up on the platform for something that can do a half-decent job or possibly a better job depending on the exact context. That's a little bit further down the work that we're going to do, but it will enable a big step towards full internationalization because it's just not possible to bundle absolutely everything internally. So I mentioned improving the mobile experience. I've got here mobile, keyboard, mobile. I mean, it's just a little bit complicated. The hardware keyboard on mobile isn't really supported because we have soft keyboards, which is great. But soft keyboards can cover your app, so folk have started having to work around so that bits of their app can be more visible when keyboards come up. We want to make this just work out of the box. It's not a thing that you should have to spend any time on. So we're going to spend more time on the mobile experience, particularly around the areas of keyboard, and scroll speed is one of the areas of performance that we're working on to make sure that the next release is as polished on mobile as it has become on the desktop platforms. And this will also include, enabled by some of the other technological changes and implementations under the hood, more mobile platforms. I know that PinePhone and Librem was on the list of things we wanted to have released already, but there was items that just got in the way technically that blocked it. That's done, so we can do that. And as sort of was mentioned in workshops this morning, getting apps onto mobile can still be a bit of a challenge because of certification, provisioning, all sorts of things that don't make sense when you don't want to think about the specific platform. So we're going to see how to make the whole experience in deploying on mobile better. Of course, we need shiny new widgets, no different than any other product. We've got to add new stuff. And the first one that came up which you did see earlier today, is the inner window and the ability to have multiple inner windows as well, so they can overlap, interact, move around. That too, I'm happy to say, has already landed in our development code base, so you can play with it, and that's what I showed you was code that's readily available already, so that's pretty cool. The activity indicator, it's been requested before. You don't always want or know how long your progress is going to take. You might just want a quick visual that says something's busy. Maybe you're overlaying a button that's currently disabled while something is worked on. So an activity indicator, a pulsar, or they have various different names. Spinner is another. We have an animation that's going to drop in as the activity widget that allows you to put that into various different places, just rounding out different ways that you can ask users to hang on just a moment. And okay, maybe I did just drop this one in, but the date time is something that we've not done particularly well from user input selection. FyneX has a great date widget. I'm not just saying that because it was implemented by Derek, who's snuck in there and joined us. But the expectation is that we'll bring that into the main repository with an input widget that is going to adapt to use the operating system method. So maybe it's the widget, maybe it's throwing up a date picker like your phone would provide. So we'll just try to integrate in the way that entries and other pickers already have. The last thing, this kind of big picture planned for this 2.5 is to improve form validation, particularly around required elements. So an item in a form can have validation. I don't know if we had an example today, but when it's not passing validation, there'll be an error showing you where the problem is, and a submit button would be disabled. That's default behavior. But we realized that very frequently people were implementing an empty string validation because they wanted it to be a required field. And actually that's something different. We want to mark required so people know the expectation is it's non-blank. So that's one of the other features when updating form, improving the validation and setting it so that required is a particular type of input that we can present to the user. Plus, well, I mean, it's the first time that we've got a captive audience in the room, and we've got more people than ever online. If you have a thought about the widgets that we should be adding in the upcoming release, this is your opportunity. Shout out, or say it quietly, write it down on a scrap of paper and slide it over the table. All's good. It's nice to hear from people what they think is going to be valuable to the project. And for myself, I think for people working on the project, another really important part of growing this ecosystem is to be spreading the word. There's things that we can do. We're going to be listing more apps. So if you have an app, share it. Fill in the form, the little submit button, and tell us about the piece of software that you want. As you saw earlier, that will become more widely distributed just by way of having it listed in the database that we're building up. And we want to do more to help you not only tell people that you have an app, but to get it out there distributed. So the infrastructure that we have in place for deploying apps across multiple platforms is going to become more widely available for open source developers who want to be shared through the platforms that we're building. So we don't have anything specific there, but get in touch if you're interested and we'll let you know over the coming weeks. Documentation and tutorials. I didn't just write the app because I was listening to a talk earlier. It is something we need to do more of, and as the project accelerates forward, we need to accelerate the documentation as well, or it gets behind and folk use great new things but don't have the experience or the confidence of the documentation behind it. But here's what you can do. You could share your knowledge and experience of the platform with colleagues, friends, your next door neighbor. I mean, next time you think about talking about the weather, why not tell them about this really amazing graphical toolkit for building apps simpler than ever before and show them it working on your phone with no code changes. So we want to get out there. If you're going to a conference, if you're presenting something at work, this is an opportunity to tell folk, actually, this is an interesting space. It may not be the right solution for you, but the more people involved, the more feedback we can get, the better we can shape it up for everybody. And be part of this community. I think you've seen a lot of what people want to give in the support they are giving, the applications they're creating, the conversations and discussions that we have. Be part of it. you've been here today. Stay in touch, and yeah, let us know how you think. If that's not enough, I have some specific ideas about what you could do. Well, you can learn more. I think I've linked a few documentation pages before. If you're joining us online, you probably know that we have a YouTube channel, and there's a lot of good videos there. Everything that you've seen today will be uploaded at some point over the coming weeks. So check out for more videos being added to the FyneConf 2023 YouTube playlist. But also, there's lots of ways that you can contribute to the project. Like I said, you could just tell us what you think is going to be helpful. But you could do code. You could be one of these heroes that gets a congratulatory, oh my goodness, you've contributed your first thing to this project, thanks. And it may even be in a release only a month or two away from now. But documentation, design, anything that you think is going to help the project, or if you want to know how you could get involved with skills that you've got, then join one of the channels and we'll help you figure that out. Do share your apps, like I said, help us grow the list of applications that we know about in the open source world. And if you would like to, it would be lovely if you would sponsor the project. We've been very lucky with generous sponsors over the years, and it makes it possible to do things like this along with local sponsors, but to be able to put together, I don't know, t-shirts or stickers, and to be in the future taking people to new venues. We've been able to thank the speakers for being here today by contributing to their travel expenses. As we travel around the world, it would be great to help more people get together, because it's an event like this that I think a lot of the interesting discussions happen, and we figure out where to take the project forward. So thank you very much, everybody, for being here, for your attention and your enthusiasm, and we will see you at the next event. And for anybody who's still here after that, or would like to discuss further, we are going to be jumping onto our Jitsi channel, where we can have a Q&A. We've got a number of the team here, and I think some folk are going to join us remotely as well. So I'm going to try and put that up on the screen. If you're interested to have a Q&A, that will be up there. And for people in the room, there's some drinks over there that will help with some of the discussion. If you're joining us from home, I'm sure there's a fridge. Let us know what you're enjoying. And yeah, so post your questions or shout them out. And yeah, we'll see where what anybody wants to ask of the project. And I'll jump out to that.